Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor. Keith, happy Halloween, my friends.
Happy Halloween. Yesterday had practice, and the players that I coach all came in their best Keith costume, I guess. Coach Keith costume.
No way.
Yeah, we had a couple of bald caps on the sidelines. There was a baby doll in a like sarong kind of wrap, and a lot of sun hoodies and a couple vests and all bucket hats. Everybody had the bucket hat, which is like a coaching staple of mine during tournaments, not necessarily during practice. But they did take time. Somebody was asking me about the podcast, and somebody said something about like, "Oh, you mean your radio show?" And I was like, I make fun of my co-host about this all the time, that it never has been and never will be a radio show. And it's funny that even somebody else noticed the radio show, which I guess is like an inside joke at this point, a meme.
Well, look, all I want is to have live hotline and people call in. And I've tried to get people to call in, and people just won't call in. Everyone, like, I want people to call in and tell me how horribly wrong we are about something. I want to scream at somebody, hang up on them in the middle of their call. Like, this is my dream, right? I listen to sports radio in New York, and it's incredible content. And so maybe I'm just trying to manifest that, Keith.
Is it working? I don't know if it's working yet, but we'll see.
But weekly radio show. Do
we need more zany sound effects? Like, I don't know.
I feel like how traditional podcast are we versus radio showish? I don't really know the answer to that.
I feel like extremely traditional podcast.
Okay.
We are not bucking the trend that hard.
Well, I love that your players did that. Did somebody do the best job? Was there like an obvious?
Yeah, I had to certainly give I was asked to judge who had the best costume, and I obviously had to pick the one with a little Miles, who was called Miles throughout the practice. So, the player was like warming up with the baby attached. It was like, being a dad never stops. You never take a break. And then partway through, they had to take it off, and I was like, oh yeah, see, they tell you you're never really ready. There's never a perfect time. It just happens, and you go with it.
I love it. Well, today we're going to be breaking down more of club nationals. We're also going to be talking with some players today as well. Claire Chastain will join us in a little bit. I think we're going to have Khalif El Salam on this show as well. And we're going to be talking to somebody from all three of the champion teams over the next couple weeks. So looking forward to that. And quickly, first, I want to make a correction from our show last time. We were talking about the coaching staff for Molly Brown, and we mentioned Joaquin Nagel, and we mentioned Andy Loveseth, but we failed to mention Alexia McCaskill, who is a part of their coaching staff. So just want to apologize for not mentioning her during that conversation.
A big contributor to the team's success this year, particularly their mental toughness. Somebody who could help the team stay grounded and stay strong and remind them of the confidence. And clearly that came very much into play, and is something that this team has had challenges with before, and was one of the reasons they sought her out. And also, I'd have to dig through the annals to find if we've ever had a black woman as a coach of a national championship team. So certainly congratulations on that front. It's hard to think of black women coaches in Club Ultimate in general, like maybe Hadia Roderick. Like they're just few and far between. So glad to have somebody who's out there doing such great work and getting respect for it.
So let's dig into the women's division. We'll talk with Claire a little bit more about the mental toughness side of things for Molly. We obviously talked a lot about Molly last week. Let's talk about some of these other teams. And I think maybe we should begin, Keith, with the Sixers, who came close to beating Molly in some ways. I don't know about close, but we're up on them at halftime and playing very well in the semifinal before letting the game slip away late. But Keith, you have been so right about this team all this time. Now, ultimately they don't make it back to the final, but they certainly lived up to the expectations that we had for this team following their really strong 2019 performance.
they got the win that I was counting on, them beating Flipside in pool play, and they win Pool B, and that just kind of opens things up for them to get into semifinals. They go through Schwa, which they won that game 15-9. If they had been where they would have been otherwise, they would have been facing off with Fury in quarterfinals. So that was kind of the crux of the decision point there. And Sixers delivered, and Britt DeSantos looks like one of the best players on the planet. But they have some depth. I think that's the thing that people are underestimating about this team, is maybe we don't see them as much. So people aren't used to the rest of their contributors. People are starting to get to know some of them, but whether it's more of their top end players like Alyssa Mason and Hannah Dawson and Molly Lewis, or whether it's players who play a less like stat heavy role like Reeve Chan, like they have a lot of players who are able to compete, and I think that they're going to continue to get better.
For these top level teams, I feel like, particularly in the women's division, where a lot of times they're going to get to these big semis games often mostly unchallenged. I mean, it depends a little bit on their seeding and things of that nature, but they had to play a tough game against Flipside, a very exciting game. But what does Sixers need to change to win in that game against Molly Brown, especially considering that they had the lead and then lost it?
Not a ton. I mean, clearly they're able to compete at that level, and one bad half is fixable. Now, I'm sure Molly Brown would say it's a lot harder than it sounds to do that. It took us a long time to do it, but taking your lumps is certainly a part of the process. But the Sixers team has so many players who are like really entering their primes and coming back off the time away. They had a bunch of players who were playing in either the World Games or World Ultimate Club Championships, or both. They're like missing Laura Kinoshita for a lot of the year. She was supposed to play World Games. Like, she's that caliber of player, but was hurt for World Games, didn't get to play then, played sparingly at Nationals. So that kind of player can make a big difference for them, and they'll continue to develop talent. They had a 19-year-old starting on their O-line this year. So I think that they're on the right track as a team. But the other thing is that the environment is competitive. I mean, this was the deepest field that we've seen in years. This was that Sixers Flipside result somehow, though, was the only result outside of seed in the entire pool play. Every other result in pool play went to the higher seeded team. So the more things change, the more they stay the same. But
gosh, I didn't realize how much it went straight to the numbers there. But you're right.
Yeah, I didn't either until I really sat down and looked at it. But we waited all year to we felt like we had a deep crop of talented teams, and if we could get to quarterfinals, the sparks would fly. But it kind of also bled into the top end of pool play. Getting great games between Molly Brown and Boot Squad and Sixers and Flipside. Those games were very meaningful because of what they meant for your bracket prospects. So I think we ended up getting some really good competition, and I'm looking forward to how this could continue in the women's division, or even if this is just where we end up landing for a little while, having 6-7 teams that feel like they could really compete in the right environment, that's going to lead to exciting action at Nationals.
I mean, it truly was 7 deep this year, right? I mean, I think you look at the top 7 seeds all made quarters, and then traffic lost to Schwa. So Schwa got the upset. They win 15-9 in a pre-quarter to be the 9 seed getting in instead of the 8. And then Schwa got pretty cleanly dispatched by Sixers. But other than that, those other 7 teams, Brute, Scandal, Phoenix, you name it, they were all good enough to get to semis. I mean, you look at the scores, maybe Scandal, not quite, but Scandal was only 2 points behind Phoenix in pool play. They lost to Molly Brown by 4. And in a different matchup, maybe they do a little better. I mean, Claire Trope is playing just unbelievable ultimate right now. We're talking about Claire Trope as a possible defensive player of the year and also possibly an offensive player of the year, in the conversation for both awards, which is an extremely rare thing to happen. But that's what happens when you play on D-line and also drive the offense all the time. But other than that, I mean, you look at these scores. Fury Brute was 14-13. Molly Sixers was 15-13. Brute Phoenix was 13-11 in quarters. I think, Flipside gets the tough Fury matchup and loses 15-9. But I think flip side looked like the real deal. They played super tight game with Sixers. They played a super tight game with Phoenix. They're clearly in that mix of teams, and that is very exciting.
Yeah, I find Phoenix's tournament to be interesting because so much buzz around this team. There's so much was expected of them. Could they take the leap? Could they solidify themselves as one of the elites of the division? And like my emotional reaction to their weekend, like without sitting down to like really think about it, is like kind of a failure. They didn't even make semis. What waves did they make? That nothing. But they lost one game. They went to nationals and went 5-1, and they lost one game. And that's it. Does that make your entire tournament a failure? I don't think so. Now, obviously, I think that for them getting to semifinals was probably like what they felt like they needed to do to achieve their goals in the year. So I think that they would say like, yes, we came up short of our goals, but a failure feels like a hard label to take. But that's kind of the nature of sports, right? You win or you lose the game. Like there isn't a lot between the two.
Yep.
So it's an interesting thing to kind of look at their end results and simultaneously be disappointed and impressed.
Look, they absolutely could have won that Brute game. I mean, that's really what it comes down to for me. It's not like they lost to Fury in a game that they weren't really in. They were very much in the game, and they had some really painful mistakes in the game, and they came up short. Now, Brute Squad deserved to win, played great, was close to making the final, played their brand of defense first ultimate, and it was very effective. But Phoenix has to come away feeling disappointed, not because they didn't make semis, but because they were in a game with a team that they should have been able to beat, and they didn't because they made mistakes that were preventable. I mean, in particular, like I can't get it out of my head. I mean, there was just a absolutely heartbreaking Sarah Mexroth drop late in the game that I think would have tied it up. And then instead it goes the other way and Brute gets a break. And it was like in the end zone for a score, clap catch at the cone, just point blank drop. And, that's not the only thing that kept them from winning that game, but really brutal in that moment. So, Phoenix probably this whole year, though, had to be thinking next year's our year. You got to integrate these new pieces, and then you're getting Lindsay Sue back next year, and all the college players are a year older. Like it feels like next year is more their year to try to make a real push.
If all the pieces come together, but I don't know that you think that when you add two of the best players on the planet to your team,
that's fair,
and you were so close to having the breakthrough year last year. Many people would say they did have a breakthrough year last year.
They just never were quite there in my mind, Keith.
Yeah. So like, I don't know that they were so much as like, yeah, we're developing for 2023. Like, I mean, there was a high expectation on this team for a reason. And
I just don't think we ever saw the offense get there. I mean, we saw offensive struggles at WCC. They got their doors blown off by Molly at Pro Champs. You got to get the offense up a level if you want to be competitive for a championship. And, you look at the teams, particularly Molly. I mean, I think, was Molly's offense the best in the country? I think probably was. Like when it all comes down to the end here. I was never super impressed with Fury's offense or Brute's offense.
That's probably the case.
A lot of defensive teams.
Yeah, big defense here.
By the way, Traffic got Schwa back in the Pro Flight play-in game. And so Schwa is in the Elite Flight and Traffic is in the Pro Flight. Which means that all of the top 8 seeds made next year's Pro Flight. Are you surprised?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, I feel like Schwa Traffic, breaking point is about the line you would draw. Maybe a young Riot team is feisty or something like that, but no, I'm not super surprised by this outcome.
Ozone, we already talked about it though. Ozone beat Pop, Keith. Ozone 15th, they did. Pop 16th.
This is true. They beat them by 1, and I got chirped at by it, and I love it. If you're gonna go out there and get the dubs, chirp away. Pop did have the better point diff in pool play, so there's credit to go around.
Other thoughts on the final standings, Keith?
I think that our picks did decently. We both had Fury and Molly Brown in the final. We both had Fury winning. And I think it's clear that I underestimated Molly Brown, but it was one of those things where I said, they can't do it until they do. And they did. So it changes everything after that. But I'd say that for the most part, this was the division where the most chalk happened and we had the most stuff right accordingly.
Well, we're going to talk more about Molly and their journey to the top right now with Claire Chastain, who's been on the team for 8 years, 2014, her first year playing with Molly. So she joins us next right here on Deep Look. I want to talk to you about Sunset Lake CBD, a hemp farm located just outside of Burlington, Vermont. For years, Sunset Lake produced milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and in 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD. Sunset Lake CBD believes that their farm-to-table approach is the best way for you to get responsibly produced, high-quality CBD products that actually work. Sunset Lake CBD crafts topicals, gummies, oils, and more to help with stress, aches, and sleep. I know I'm going to be looking forward to taking some CBD down to the Blue Ridge Mountains with me. I'm going on a little vacation in next week. I'll be back for the Deep Look, though, so don't worry. We'll get a show in. And just looking forward to being able to relax in the mountains, take some CBD, take the edge off, and it's going to be that Sunset Lake. So check them out today at sunsetlakecbd.com and use coupon code DEEPLOOK for 20% off all products. That's just one word, Deep Look. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer-owned, Vermont-grown. Joining us now on Deep Look is Claire Chastain. She's a captain for Denver Molly Brown and is coming off of a huge 2022 winning World Games Gold, WCC Gold, and the Club National Championships for the first time. Claire, congratulations on a huge year. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing really well.
So when you have a year like this, I'm sure you have to kind of sit back and reflect on what were the biggest moments. If you could only win one of these three championships, which one would you choose?
Club Nationals for sure. Yeah. It's feels really important to have been on this journey for a really long time with this team and work over and over and over again to get here. So it kind of feels like the most pivotal of the three.
You've been on the team since 2014 and you've come close so many times. I know that during the broadcast of the semifinals against Sixers, there was a graphic up that showed all the years of semifinals losses, often to Brute Squad. And what did it take to finally get over the hump and win?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure a lot of people have observed that we had a lot of top end talent for a long time and tried really hard to play through that talent. And, we've had a lot of different kinds of systems over the years too, offensive and defensive, and had some turnover in leadership and coaching and roster and whatnot. And so I think what it took was finally getting some consistency, especially with coaching and leadership, and also just real commitment to playing through our depth. We went from having an O and a D line to having three separate lines. We committed for most of the season to try to play as evenly as possible, which we were able to do pretty far into nationals. And yeah, I think it really took us building out the rest of our roster to be able to, and being less reliant on our top end talent to carry a lot of weight to get past semis and win a championship.
as a player that I think it's not a stretch to say would be considered part of that top end talent group, what was it like for you individually to make that adjustment and change your role on a team that you've been a part of and a big focal point of for so long?
Yeah, that's a good question. I ended up playing a lot of defense, which is pretty unusual. I've played offense for Molly Brown, I think every year that I've been on the team. I played one tournament and maybe like one Saturday on a D-line, and then kind of yanked me back to offense back in like 2018. And so it was definitely like an adjustment. I was really enjoying playing defense, especially, World Games, you get to flip back and forth. And I think that I just had to do a lot of work individually on kind of letting go and like letting go of like the control that I feel like, I've kind of had to have on the team, and putting a lot of trust in my teammates. And, the intention wasn't necessarily to not have me play on offense. Our lines were going to like rotate evenly. And then it just ended up that the line that I was on was kind of struggling to hold. And so we ended up, moving like Lisa Monuvale's line to like mostly playing offense, and then splitting the other two lines into two D lines. And because we were breaking early in the Fury game, we didn't really need me on the field any more than I was. So yeah, it was like definitely an adjustment, but it feels really good to have like contributed both like leadership wise and on the field wise to getting us a championship.
Well, it's been an interesting couple of seasons for Molly Brown, sort of post the big pandemic hiatus for Frisbee. You didn't play much last year leading into the series. And in some ways that was true this year, maybe a little bit more because you played the Bay Area tournament and then you came out and played pro championships. The Bay Area start was maybe not kind of the expected result for the Molly roster that we'd seen. You lose big to Fury, you lose to Flipside. What did you learn at that tournament? And, sort of when do you feel like the switch flipped and you turned into the team that was able to make the run and then beat Fury, this juggernaut team that was the heavy favorite to win the title?
Yeah, we were kind of experimenting with a new offense through Bay Area, and we kind of, had been playing against ourselves a lot, and it was working pretty well in that regard. There were some definite like frustrations and challenges to the offense, but we were kind of anticipating that had teams not been able to see it, then it would have been more successful. And then we ran into a Fury team that kind of figured it out pretty quick how to stop it, and it gave us, a ton of challenge. I think we lost that game like 15-7, and it didn't even really feel that close. And so we like went back to the drawing board in between Bay Area and Pro Champs. And right before Bay Area, that was the time, I think it was like Bay Area was the first time we had ever played in the three lines. So we knew that we needed more consistency in who we were playing with. And then we needed to like make offensive adjustments to make it easier for us to score and more efficient for us to score. And so we made some of those adjustments. We had like a meeting on Thursday night, and then we were able to come into Pro Champs, and, it wasn't perfect, but we implemented the adjustments that we had made really well. And that kind of gave us a lot of confidence. Like I feel like Pro Champs was like a sink or swim moment for us, and it really could have gone multiple ways, and it turned out like going the best way that it could have. And we were able to like play through our depth and really commit to like this like 3-line rotation, even though there were some moments where we faltered. We went back to the like tightening up and that kind of stuff. And then we recentered around like the values of knowing that we needed to win with our whole team. And we were able to do that, especially during finals. I think finals, we evenly rotated through every line. If you look at the kind of stats or whatever. And so, yeah, we were able to do that. And then we had like a pretty rocky, we played sectionals and regionals, a lot of the same competition. We were like really competing against ourselves all the time for like the 6 weeks leading up to nationals. And we worked with a mental toughness coach this year, Piers Kowalski, who is in Colorado Springs. And he really gave us a lot of tools to like work through some of that like conflict right before nationals. And I think at nationals, getting past Brute Squad was really one of the like sink or swim moments. And then at halftime in the game against Sixers, you know, there was a lot of reverting to our past selves, and it's like really easy for us to revert to our past selves and get really nervous and feel like there's only a couple of people that this team can run through. And I think when we just like kept trying to iterate that that's not true, and we're going to do it with everybody, we did.
Was there a point in this season that you felt like this year was going to be different? Was there something that made you feel a different type of optimism or different energy around the ability of this year's team to have the success that it ended up having?
Maybe when we set our roster, I was like, this is a sick team. But after that, I was like, you know, like the struggles at Bay Area were really hard. When we run Pro Champs, it was like a really big deal for us. And I think, you know, there was still like the question of like, we know we're gonna see Brute Squad at some point in time. We know that we have to beat Fury to win. We didn't think that there was like really another way around it. And so for me, I was pretty nervous the whole time and had like a lot of anxiety going in, feeling like pre-disappointment because it's been 11 seasons of feeling that disappointment. And I remember talking to someone and just being like, I don't know what a winning season feels like or like what a championship season feels like. And it turns out it's like a lot of highs and a lot of lows. It feels like every other season kind of that's just like really up in the air. And yeah, there's like always doubt when you've done it so many times, or, you know, when you've lost that game so many times. And so, yeah, I don't know that it really started clicking until nationals and seeing like how Manu and Vale were playing, seeing how Sai and Reed were playing, seeing how some of like our rookies who like were taking over and didn't have like that baggage with them that a lot of the veterans did have.
Yeah, remarkable. I mean, when you look back now on past seasons and you look at this season, does it feel like this team just simply had more talent and that's why you won? Or do you think that there were, because, you know, there's been long talk about Molly Brown and like mentality issues and like having long periods of struggles like in semis when the spotlight is the brightest and, you know, give up 5 straight breaks or something. And I know that that's been a focus of the team for a number of seasons now. So do you look at it more as like we got better and we have the best players? I mean, Valeria in particular was tremendous at nationals. Or do you think it's more that the team was able to embrace some of the, you know, the mental toughness aspects that are so important to peak performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little bit of both. Like we got a pretty talented and athletic rookie class in particular. So we like upped our ability to play really good person defense because we got some extraordinary athletes to come in. We had a healthy Valeria, which is helpful. Like we didn't have Valeria much last year, and she just didn't play and practice with us as much. And so her and Manu were around a little bit more. But then, yeah, I think, you know, we all kind of went back to the drawing board. We had a meeting like early March or something and talked a lot about like how we want to win and what we want to do to get there. And I think the team like collectively worked a lot harder this season, you know, like you can tell by the workout group me and, you know, there was like weekly morning mini and there was a lot more commitment, I think, to like skill development and like physical fitness this year from the team than I had seen like previously. And yeah, I would say like our rookie class just kind of came in and didn't really have that mental kind of block that a lot of us veterans had. And so when you see them performing, I think a lot of us like really fed off of that, and they were being extremely brave and like courageous in the things that they were doing, you know, like Sai's just in finals, like not being guarded and catching everything and you know, throwing break throws and doing exactly what she needed to be doing. But I think it would be so easy to, you know, see someone falter there and she didn't. And I think that like really gave the team a lot of confidence. And so I think there's a little bit of both. we got very confident, really good rookies. We committed a little bit more to the work that needed to be done. And yeah, we thought we could do it.
You've been a part of seeing a lot of these young players who are really blossoming develop. I mean, you spent time playing with Revo when Manu and Valeria were younger. Obviously you've coached a number of the players who are now rookies or even some of the vets on the team. You've been able to see these players develop. What has it been like, and what does it mean to see them succeed on this level and really take such a big role in the team's success this year as you win a title?
Yeah, it feels really fun to watch Manu and Valeria like on the field together. There was a point in the season, Bay Area, where we got together and we were like, I don't know if they can play together. They were both throwing so many turnovers. They were, like keying in on each other. It was just like, I wouldn't say it was a disaster, and I feel like I can say this because we joke about it a lot. But it was like really hard to watch. And then going from seeing them at Bay Area to how they played finals, just like able to see the field a little bit more, not hone in just on each other, but when they needed to get open, they got open. They made like really great decisions. It was some of the best Frisbee that I've ever seen both of them play. I love both of them like so much, and it's really fun to see them in that element, both like being really confident, being really courageous, and also like having a ton of fun. They're like really fun people to play with, and they both clearly like love and have dedicated so much to the sport that it's fun to like see them kind of like the fruits of their labor, just like witness it on the field. It's like very beautiful to watch. And then, all the quantity. I mean, I've coached like 12 people on the team or something at this point, and it's super fun to go from coach to like teammate and being a captain and whatnot. I'm not necessarily like always a peer, but it does feel like I can get there at sometimes with people. And it's really fun to like be on the line with Cleo and be like, I'm going to throw you this throw no matter what, or like, I need you to throw this throw to me. And for like her to do it, and just watching like them blossom into like good club players. I think it's really hard to transition from college to club, and they have done such a good job of it. And especially like watching them integrate into the culture. Molly Brown's pretty like fun and goofy, and I don't really get to see that as a coach all the time. And so it's fun to kind of be in like social situations with them too.
So we go from, we're talking about San Francisco, and we're talking about Raleigh, and we're talking about Seattle. And now we have two champion teams out of Denver, kind of out of nowhere. I want to know how the parties have been the last couple of weeks. And like, is this a surprise to you? I'm asking you to comment on Bravo a little bit here as well, but like, it just feels like very suddenly, wow, Denver, we knew that Molly was good for a long time. Bravo was maybe going to eventually get back to this championship level, but happened way sooner than we expected. And now we have the college teams that are maybe going to be title favorites coming up here in the next couple seasons. So just your comments on Denver as a growing hub of Ultimate.
Mm-hmm. The parties have been super fun. We took the trophy to Red Rocks, which, I don't know if you know a lot of the individuals on our team, but people love to rave and they love to go to EDM shows and stuff, which I don't always participate in, but we got a lot of people to show up and, tried to carry the trophy in, then decided it was a bad idea. And so we've been having a really good time, just reveling in the joy of winning. I don't think nobody told me it felt this good, and I think a lot of the team feels the same way, as like we'll just randomly be texting each other we won and sharing a bunch of pictures and videos and stuff, and it just feels like you want to kind of keep it going forever. Surprised, I don't necessarily feel surprised about us. I feel really if I look back, I'm like, that makes sense that we won. We've worked really hard. It's been a really long journey. And then for Bravo, I didn't like totally follow their season, but So yeah, like I was surprised because in the men's division there are certain favorites, and Bravo was not one of them. And but I think I like to look at the overlap between like the influence that Quandary had on Molly Brown winning and the influence that Mama Bird had on Bravo winning. You know, a lot of those young folks are like really showing up on their club teams, and that wasn't necessarily the case when I was starting to play out of college. Like it was still really dominated by the older players who had a lot of experience. And I think it's really cool that both teams like bring in rookies and allow them to be in positions to like play really pivotal roles. Cause I think it would be easy to say, oh, you're a rookie, you know, here's your place on the team. And it's pretty clear that neither of our teams do that. We really like to utilize the talent that we have, and regardless of how old they are or how much experience they've had on the team. So, yeah.
I feel like Molly Brown has carved out its own identity within the club ultimate space. You know, whether it's Molly Weird or the team has been like really outspoken and active in social causes, especially over the past, you know, year or two, being very visible and present in fighting for marginalized groups. Was there ever a tension between trying to become a title team and keeping those other parts of your identity as a central part of Molly Brown?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the big things we really struggle with is like community engagement, like being involved in our local ultimate community. And it's hard to balance that during the season. It's hard to balance anything during the season other than like training and playing. And I think we tried pretty hard to focus on the community engagement like before the season started, so that we got to spend the season focusing on us and trying to win, because we knew that it's really hard to balance those things. But also, you know, we have a whole year as a team. We aren't usually ever like disbanded. There's always like people doing active things on the team. And so we tried to kind of compartmentalize those things during the season. The thing that is hard for us is that we really wanted to commit to redistribution, and club is so expensive, and we do like a big sliding scale where like people who make more on our team and have more access to money pay more, and people who make less pay less. And when you add in like wanting to give more money to the community, the local community, local organizations, it just becomes really cumbersome financially for a lot of people. And so I think we're going to have to like go back to the drawing board and figure out how we can do that in a way that like feels good for everybody, but doesn't, you know, put people in bad like financial situations. But yeah, I think that we've done a pretty good job of like balancing. And you know, there's always people talking politics. Megan Ives, you go into any conversation you have with her, she's talking about something. And that's usually happening on the team at practice at any point in time. And so it's a really nice like atmosphere to be in, where you can kind of easily switch between, okay, we're going to talk about like local politics. And then we're going to like change and like go into like doing a warm up drill or something. It's a pretty fun for me personally, because I like doing a place to be.
I just want to zoom backwards really quick. And World Games, U.S. loses to Germany, and things looked really out of sorts. Did you take anything from that experience and bring it forward to the club season?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that happened after that Germany game was that, you know, the players got together and were like, what do we want out of this experience? And, you know, we like brought that to the coaches, and the coaches were super receptive to like the feedback that we had been given them. And I think that is something that I feel like we brought to Molly Brown, is that, you know, we have this group of 3 coaches and they're amazing. And personally, as a coach, you know, it's like you can only do so much without like the consent of players and like the will of the players, because the players are the people on the field executing the plan. And so like, I think it's important to always consider like how the ultimate feels, you know, or how it looks on the field. And so I think we brought a lot of, especially the captains, brought a lot of feedback to the coaches. And the coaches were like receptive to that and made the changes when they needed to be made. And I think that was like a good overlap between like World Games and this championship team, is like the players need to feel empowered to play and play in a way that like highlights their strengths and makes you feel confident and makes you, feel like what's going to happen and is like predictable and whatnot. And I think, those were the kind of two ways that overlapped. And also World Games, you're like playing against the best players ever. It gives you a lot of confidence. And so you go to like club and you're like, I'm still playing against the best players ever because I get to play against like Lisa at practice and Manu at practice and Volley at practice and Alika at practice. Like you get great reps at Molly Brown practice, and I got great reps at World Games practice. And I think that was, helpful in terms of like confidence on the field, especially like during the transition from like World Games, WCC back into club.
And to sort of cycle forward, you talk about the cost of playing club. Announcement last week that Western Ultimate League is spinning up a new team in Denver, the Alpenglow. And just curious for your thoughts on that. I know you've played PUL in the past, but I also know that it's been a little bit of a controversial point amongst Molly Brown players in general about semi-pro.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. It's always hard for me to comment on. I'm obviously a person who would like prefer if pro was not in existence at all, men's or women's or whatever. I do appreciate the accessibility part of it. I think that, a lot of club teams could do a better job of like making club more accessible via like sliding scale and fundraising and whatnot. And not just like generally the pro models. I'm kind of anti all of the ones that exist. So yeah, I won't be playing. That's not true for everybody on Molly Brown. Molly Brown doesn't have like an official stance or anything. But yeah, definitely like an interesting changing landscape in like the Colorado Ultimate community with the introduction of the new pro teams. So it was nice for me personally when we just didn't have to deal with it. But here we are, and we have to have the conversations, and that's all good. But yeah, I'm not sure how people are going to handle it. I think we'll see in terms of timing, and it doesn't conflict with the club season. So I doubt that, Molly Brown's really going to have any sort of official word or anything on it.
Jump starts the 2023 season a little fast. So you're starting to have to think about what are we going to do? When does the title of defense start? When do those first conversations start happening?
Yeah, good question. January 1st, maybe? I went to the gym last night and I was like, I don't even know what to do. I did the stair climber for 30 minutes because I was like, what do I need to be doing right now? I have no clue. Not on a program. This is like the first off season I haven't been training for something in a long time. So yeah, I think we'll spend the next couple months like partying and cross-country skiing and snowboarding and playing pickleball and doing the fun things that we like to do. And then, we'll get started with 2023 come January.
Awesome. Well, Claire, congrats on a banner year and your first club championship. And we appreciate you giving us some time.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Welcome back to Deep Look. So great to hear from Claire. Keith, I think Claire was she number one on the list of like top players without a title in the women's division?
Oh, on the spot here.
I'm just trying to think through,
yeah.
Who are players that are super elite that don't have a title? Like a lot of them already do.
Yeah, that's true. And like, maybe a little while ago, you might have said that about Riot players, but Riot is not quite the same program. And yeah,
I don't think there's any Riot players that are better than Claire.
Right. Yeah, that seems like it's the case. I wonder who inherits the title. Who do you think inherits the title? Or get at us, Steve. Deep Look Pod on Twitter.
Well, because like Claire Trope has won. So she does not qualify, even though she's on Scandal now. It's probably somebody from Phoenix. BDS is probably the right answer.
Or Lindsay Sue, or I don't know.
as of 2022, it's got to be DeSantos.
Yeah.
She's going to finish the highest on the podium, or all club first teamer this year.
But it's hard to complain because she's like 23 or whatever.
Well, sure. But that's the difference, right? Claire's been on this grind, getting to the top level over and over again without winning one. So pretty interesting stuff. We're going to hear from Khalif El Salam and Ben Laurie from Mixtape and Bravo, respectively, next week on the show. So right now we're going to talk mixed and men's divisions down the board at nationals. So let's dive in with the mixed division. We talked a ton about Mixtape and Noise, and I'm really curious. This Exist team, Keith, they have not really been a program that is up at the top conversation of nationals, and yet they looked like one of the very best teams there. They end up finishing tied for third, but it doesn't feel crazy to me that maybe they could have beaten Noise if they matched up, or they could have beaten. Did they play Dragon? Now that I'm thinking about it,
they played Dragon in pool play. They won 14-12,
and they won. They won the pool, so they did beat Dragon. I mean, they might have been the second best team at this tournament.
I think there's a very real case for that. I mean, we said prior to the final that this felt like the final, that their semifinal, like this was probably the team that was going to win. But I think folks may have been putting the cart before the horse with that, but I do think there was some of that sentiment out there. And Exist gets that win over Dragon Thrust, and I think that changed how everybody viewed them. I mean, they had been kind of a team that had felt a little like from a power ranking standpoint, they were kind of on cruise control prior to that. They just hadn't played a lot of really top level teams. So it was hard to say what to expect from them, but they showed out at nationals, and that's all you can do really. Is they won most of the games that they played this year. They played their best pretty much when they needed to. And I think especially with mixed division teams, you always wonder about how sticky is this going to be? How much is this team going to be able to keep the core together, to recruit, to grow? It's a great sign, I think, that they have some structure in place, that there's a lot of young talent on the team. But I'll be very curious about what they look like next year, because this year's team definitely has all the signs of a team that could be a presence again next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the coaching staff. Diana DeLeo and Izzy Bryant did a great job getting this team ready to compete at the highest level, despite not necessarily a lot of players on the roster having competed at that level. But Jenny De Jesus was fantastic. We talked about her a little bit last week. Emily Barrett was great. And they had very steady backfield play from Matt Lamar and Oliver Chartok. I just was super impressed. I think, Keith, they are actually in a great position to improve the roster next year, because I think that because of how successful they were this year, they're going to be able, they already had a very good recruiting year this year. Like, it was kind of like a talked about thing in the New York City community that Exist decisions for roster spots was kind of holding up everything else in the community for all of the regionals level teams. And I would not be surprised at all if they picked off a couple of pony veterans next year. I think their women are clearly their strength. And if they can pick up a really strong, one or two male matching players, maybe a handler and a cutter, they have the tools to be a national championship contending team.
You heard it here first, folks. Charlie says Jack Williams and Ryan Osgar exist next year. Book it.
Would that make them the title favorites? It would have to, right?
Yeah, I mean, without seeing Mixtape's roster, sure, yes. Without knowing anything about any of the other teams other than what we know now, yes, I guess so. I mean, you're picking up the consensus number one player in the men's division. Seems pretty good. And the AUDL
so
MVP.
Strange that we'll get to Ring. We'll get to Ring and those two. But elsewhere, BFG ends up kind of a weird tournament for them. Really weird. They start off with this just horrible loss to Space Force, 14-6, and then they come all the way back and end up finishing fifth. comfortably inside the pro flight. I'm not really sure what to make of that. Just a very strange, kind of like just slightly off this year, it felt like. And that's maybe to be expected after winning a title.
Very, very strange. I mean, that loss to me is going to have to go down in the annals as one of the weirdest losses we've ever seen. I mean, it's not that they lost. Like, if they had lost that game, like a normal loss, they lose 15-12 or whatever. We've seen that before. But to get the doors blown off you by a team that's never even been to nationals before, a team that probably didn't exist like the last, totally wild.
And by the way, BFG later wins the pool and Space Force loses the pool and doesn't make it to pre-quarters.
Right. A team that didn't make pre-quarter, a team that finished at literally last place, right? Like they were down in the dregs of the standings by the end of the tournament. They finished 15th. Sorry, I apologize. They finished 15th. Super weird loss. I don't know what to make of it, but there's a lot of this BFG their top core is not young, not a lot of fresh legs. So maybe they needed to retool a little bit. And it was also a long year for them. We saw them at Worlds and people were underwhelmed with the way that they performed at Worlds, and maybe that was a warning sign, but it also that's a lot to put on a team as well. So it could be that effect kind of wearing them down a little bit, but very strange to me. The results from BFG and AMP are like two of the things I have the most trouble processing from the entire tournament, let alone just the mixed division.
Well, yeah. So, AMP opens up with a loss to Shame, but then they bounce back. They beat Red Flag. They beat Toro. And then they just get crushed by Love Tractor in pre-quarters. And then proceed to win the rest of their games to make the pro flight, including beating Love Tractor in their second meeting. Now, whatever. You put as much stock into those games as you want. I mean, they lost the one that mattered. They lost the two that mattered, right? They lost the key game to Shame, and then they lost the win or go home game to Love Tractor, and they got crushed. That's such a weird loss for an AMP team that never loses a game like that. They never lose a game like that at nationals. Sure, they might lose in semis, but they're losing to Dragon. They're not losing to Love Tractor. With all due respect to Love Tractor.
AMP is the 7th best team in the country, but the 3rd best team in the South Central. So it's a weird thing, but the talent level, the experience on AMP, there's just no way you can paint this as anything other than disappointing. They put themselves in a bad position by losing to Shame. I did feel like that was a potential thing that was going to happen. I'll take my victory lap where I can about predicting Shame over AMP, but AMP from there, it's like now you're in the pre-quarter spot. That shouldn't be a death knell, but it wasn't even close against Love Tractor. Not even close. I don't get it.
You want a hot take?
Please hot take me.
This is a hot take because I don't have a lot of substance to back it up. Okay. I'll just acknowledge that to you right now. But looking over their stats from nationals, I think they play too many players, too many points. Like, everybody on this team has a lot of turnovers and a lot of, some scoring. And they clearly just were all in on the depth. And I just don't know if that's the answer when you really get down to it. You got to tighten the rotations. When you get down to it, you got to have that O-line go out there and do the thing. But I mean, look at the turnovers on this team from nationals. I'm not even going to try to add them up. It literally looks like it sums to 75.
I think there are 3 players here with 4 because of Will Helinski who don't have multiple turnovers. Everybody else has multiple turnovers.
And again, I think that speaks to a lot of players getting a lot of touches and a lot of, opportunities to play on the field, which is great. I mean, I think it's great for a team like AMP to work on building its young core up. And maybe was the goal of the season. It was a big year of turnover. They lost some really key O pieces. And at the end of the day, I just feel like they needed to maybe run a tighter rotation because it's hard to get rhythm if you don't have that.
There's too much talent on this team for this kind of result. You know, I see a team that has Paul Owens and Linda Morse and Henry Ing, Sean Mott, Lindsay McKenna, Raha Mazafari, Jordan Ryan. Like, these are all players who are proven top level contributors. Liz Hart, Nat Bova has been plugging along for total vet. Max Charles is in the same boat. Like, there's just way too many good players on this team for this kind of result to be the outcome. I'm sure they're disappointed. Like, I'm sure they know that they let it get away from them, but I want to go back and watch that game because I have to know what happened. Like, it's probably the number one game I want to watch aside from like the big showcase games that you already know about.
I'm guessing it's an energy thing. You know, Love Tractor's coming to that game. No pressure, nothing to lose. Loosey goosey. And it's just, you know, maybe a little tighter and coming off of kind of a disappointing day one. And yeah, I mean, I think you see that happen sometimes. That pre-quarters round is always, you're ripe for getting upset if you don't come out and play sharp from the start.
Charlie Eisenhood, do you want to
Keith
address the Southeast mixed region? Do you have anything you would like to say to them? Because they seem to have some things to say to you.
I said they were going to go 0-9 in pool play.
It was a bold prediction. It wasn't just, It
was a bold prediction. I knew, obviously, it was a low probability prediction. In fact, they went 3-6. One of the three teams made pre-quarters. Okay. Two of the teams finished last in their pool and did not make it out. Dirty Bird made pre-quarters. Dirty Bird advances to pre-quarters where they then lose to Noise. And so they have no teams in quarters. And ultimately, those teams finish Dirty Bird 11th, Toro 13th, Space Force 15th. I would say, Keith, I was right.
No.
I was right. Was I right that they were going to go 0-9? No. I was wrong about that, obviously. But I was basically right.
You were right.
These
that they weren't that
teams
good.
were not good. They were not good. They were better than I got to give Dirty Bird some credit because they went 2-1 in a tough pool. Or did they go 2-1?
Yeah, they went 2-1. They beat Dragon.
They beat Dragon.
In the opening upset. The thing that set off the tournament. We're like, okay.
And Space Force beat BFG. Now, but those were just like resounding, holy crap, am I wrong? Like, wow. I remember seeing those results come in and be like, wow, I really was off. But I think when all the dust settled, Keith, I was not that far off.
I think that's
I'll take a qualified.
Solace.
I'll take a very small L.
Okay.
That's it.
Like a lowercase L.
Yes.
Okay. Any other mixed division thoughts?
The only thing I really kind of comes to mind for me is that I'm pretty disappointed in how Hybrid played.
That's fair. I mean, they
didn't even make it out of pre-quarters. They got smoked by Mixtape and then they got smoked by Dragon Thrust. And I just felt like after last year, this team should have taken a step forward and been a better team. And, we saw them at Pro Champs. They're dominating Dragon Thrust in the final. And then they decide to just completely collapse and lose the game. And then, it's not like they had a terrible nationals or anything, but once again, they lose the two key games that you can't lose. But they beat Noise. They beat Shame. They make the pro flight. They're better than they played at nationals, I think. But maybe I put too much faith in this team. Too many turnovers. That's the big thing, I think. Like they cough it up too much on offense. They're going to have to figure out how to play a little more efficiently if they want to take the next step as a team.
I think both of those things are true. I think they both are better than they played at nationals and were being overestimated. I think, and maybe by themselves. Maybe they got a little overconfident after last year. They recruit some big name players. there's a lot of excitement around the team. Maybe they got a little ahead of themselves. But yeah, a disappointing result for them. I do think that like they are still like, if we ran Nationals back, I still would think that they're one of the best 6 or 7 teams. Maybe 8. Maybe I trying to account for existing
ultimately,
noise, but
they lost to the teams that finished first and third. And I feel comfortable saying that they were probably better than AMP and Polar Bears.
probably.
But, you get dealt the hand that you get. So that's my final thoughts there. Mostly the top seeded teams finished in the top 8 at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know how much I make of final standings. I mean, based on the reports we were getting from the teams and the consolation, I don't know what to make of all that. But I will say that like it was a crazy pool play. I mean, this is the most chaotic.
It was absolutely wild.
Yeah, this is beyond the pale even for the mixed division, and
it was like, I remember this. USA Ultimate Score Reporter went down on Thursday afternoon, and they were like, we have to get it back up because it's like too hard to calculate all the point diffs and like all the scenarios right now for who's in pre-quarters.
Oh, I thought it when they fed in Space Force 14 BFG 6, the system was like, that can't, just broke. It's like, we can't calculate this.
No.
Yeah. Reference error.
All right, let's move on to the men's division. I just have a question I want to ask you first, Keith. If Pony has Jeff Babbitt and Grant Lindsley for semis and finals, do they win this tournament? And by the way, Grant Lindsley, just another update on Grant, posted on social media recently that he is recovering and thankful for his family and his health, and that nothing is seriously wrong, and that's great to hear. So glad to see that he's on the path back to full health.
I don't want to discredit 2 players who I think a lot of people would say are like top 10, 15 players in the division. But it feels like it's so discrediting to Truck and Bravo to be like, oh yeah, Pony would have won if they just had these other 2 guys. Like they still had a really good team out there that didn't win, and Bravo was like playing crazy in the final. They're both like, I don't think the problem was that, like, I don't know that having Jeff Babbitt on your O-line or potentially on your playing some defense, I don't know if that solves the problem of truck stop. And, I think we talked about this in one of the subscriber pods that we did, but like, or at least in the Discord, definitely talked about it in the Discord. I don't know that Grant Lindsley, I think, is a better solution to the problems that truck stop's offense presented. And, I've talked to some folks after the games, and, they feel like particularly Grant's offensive value after the turn also could have helped punch in some of those very close scores that Pony didn't convert. I don't know that he cleans up the reset when Sam Little has a disc 5 yards outside the end zone and keeps Sam Little from overthrowing Ben Yacht and a high stall. Like I don't know that Grant solves that problem. You know what I mean? So I know my job here is to conjecture. So like from a talent standpoint, probably the 2 of them are worth the 3 goals or whatever that would make up for them. But I don't want to discredit Truck and Bravo in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously so hard, the circumstances of that semifinal, to know, not only does Pony lose a World Games player from its D-line that was kind of the driver after the turnover, but they happened in such a sort of shocking fashion. Perhaps that had an effect that is sort of unknowable on the overall performance of the team in the game. Yeah,
not only that emotional effect, but both teams had just like got all amped up to play and then didn't play for an extra 40 minutes or whatever, 45 minutes. So who knows what effect that had on both sides, on top of the emotional impact of, if you saw the interview with Rowan after the game, obviously he was overflowing with emotion just from winning the game, but also when talking about Grant. So obviously, not trying to compare which team Grant's injury affected more or anything, but just saying that there's more than just like okay, Pony was sad about it.
It's things change quick, like if Grant is out there, do they convert one more break? If you think that they do, well, then that's minus 1 point to Truck, plus 1 point to Pony. And now it's a tie game instead of it being 15-13. It's 14-14 universe. And so like, you don't need that many things to actually go flip flop for it to be different, because they coughed it up in the red zone with their D-line like 3 or 4 times in the game. And those were the situations where Grant was typically touching the disc a lot. And there's a reason he made the World Games team. So I don't know. It's hard to say. Truck was very good. I think it would have been a fantastic game, even if both teams had all their players. I do think that, it's I'm trying to think of like, what's a comparable pair of players for Truck Stop to lose? Like Boxley and I don't know. Probably not Cranston is probably not the right comp, but like David Bloodgood, maybe.
I don't know. Cranston feels like a pretty apt comp for Grant's role.
Fair enough. And like, how much does that hurt them? It definitely hurts them. Does it hurt them enough for them to lose the game? Yeah, it might. Not only do you lose a plus defender, but you lose 2 key offensive pieces. It's an interesting thing to think about. Keith, what do you make of this machine team?
Told you so.
Yeah. What the heck?
Yeah, I mean, they got punked by Bravo a bit in their quarterfinal. Running into a team that was playing exceptionally well and struggling to execute against that Bravo defense. I kind of think that machine like needs to go back to the drawing board. They need to take a different approach, or reset the team culture or something. It's a lot of weight to place on a couple of games, but like outside of the early moments of some of the tournaments this year, like did this team ever convince you that they had champions blood, that they were like that? I don't know that I got that vibe from this team. They losing to Condors in pool play. Some still pull out the pool. And then, we talked about what happened against Bravo. Like, it was not a convincing Nationals performance.
Here's what's crazy to me. They had some players play incredible tournaments. Abe Coffin.
Awesome.
12 goals, 10 assists, 2 turnovers. Keegan North. 5 goals, 9 assists, 3 blocks, no turns. Joe White played fantastic. He only had 5 turnovers on 16 assists. He played out of his mind. So what the heck is going on with this team? I feel like there's too many players who are A, really good, B, were playing really well. Why wasn't it working? Jordan Kerr played poorly. 9 turns, 2 assists. That's not good.
Paul
Arders
was
all of
quiet.
These stats with a grain of salt. Yes, Paul Arders was very quiet. It just feels like maybe they need to kind of rethink who is where and who's on our D lines, and what are the systems that we run. I mean, I know that that's a lot of stuff to think about.
Just
right?
the whole team.
Your personnel and your schemes are broken. Figure them out. But I don't know. I feel like you could take this same roster and just replay the season with things moved around in different ways, and maybe then it really works out. And maybe they don't win the title, but like these theoretically should do better than this, right? Like maybe Nate Goff needs to play on the offense. Is that crazy?
I mean, he's such a good defender, and they do cross him over some. So I do think that, like, at least on that point, maybe he does need to play more offense, but you need to be getting him touches. He's too good to not get touches. But obviously they have plenty of good offensive players, but they weren't executing at that high level, and the defense was not going out there and holding the offense up. You know what I mean? So hey, they beat Ring. That means something, right? Does it? Do we still think beating Ring's cool?
They beat Ring on day 3. Day 2. Maybe they just need to boycott day 2 of tournaments. Because that's really where the problems come in.
I don't know, man. They lost to Condors on day 1. They lost the 15 overall seed on day 1.
I know, but that game didn't end up mattering, right?
They didn't know that when they lost it, when they're out there not winning it.
That's a good point. That was another shocking result. Very strange year for a team that feels like it had left a lot on the bone. What else stands out to you, Keith?
Well, we got to talk about Ring, right? I mean,
okay, let's talk about Ring.
What do you make of this team? I mean, I'm stunned. I'm stunned by what we ended up seeing.
All right,
it just never abated for them. I kept waiting for it to like wear off, and they were going to put their foot on the gas. And that had kind of been the thought going through the regular season. Okay, they just Jack played World Games, and they played the World Club Championships. They also had the long AUDL season. That they're kind of biding their time. This is a team that's been together. They got a lot of veterans. They already kind of know what people are going to do. They got some young guys who are stepping up into bigger roles, who are very talented, so they can take some of the weight off the veterans too. It's going to be fine. And then they never put the foot on the gas. They just sat there. I don't know what happened.
All right, I'm going to give you my thoughts, and I don't exactly know what the problem was, but it was some combination of these things. Number one, they didn't have Alan Laviolette. I think he made a bigger difference for their offense than we may have seen. He reminds me, I remember years ago when we were first doing our statistics work, Josh Marquette came back in our stats as one of the most valuable players. And it was like, wow, interesting, because at the time he wasn't really, I mean, I think people knew he was a really talented thrower and very creative, but I don't think he was considered at sort of this pinnacle of ultimate, but that's what the stats were showing. And he is like Alan Laviolette in that they make things happen well on the field that you may not necessarily see obviously, because it's not like they're always throwing some gigantic perfect throws, although Alan is a great, continuation deep thrower. I think him being gone hurt them. Number two, I think Anders, I just want to mispronounce it so badly. Anders Jungst was, kind of asked to do more as a result. And he was also injured for a chunk of the season and never really felt like he was fully back this year. And I think the extra weight of the throwing that was put on him was to his detriment as a player. He had a lot of turnovers, and that hurt them. Number three, Jack Williams and Ryan Osgar, as well as they seemed to just plug in last year, late in the season, it didn't work this year. And I don't know why exactly, but it was never quite right. Their offense was never quite right. At Pro Champs, it didn't look right. And at Nationals, it didn't look right. And it never got right, and they lost because of it. They lose to Rhino, they lose to Truck, and they lose to Machine at Nationals. They beat the teams that were, talent deficient compared to them. But I think ultimately the offense just wasn't quite there. I also think we saw a little bit of regression from Saul Yannick. And some combination of those things, which obviously have interplay with one another, drove them to just not have the efficiency on offense that you have to have if you want to win in the division.
I can see the case for each of those. I think I take issue with Alan Laviolette point the most. To me, like Alan's a great player and a nice connective tissue. But like, if you have as many experienced, highly regarded players as you do on this team,
why can't Ryan be that?
Right? Why can't that's a failure of either the players, the leadership, the coaching staff? Right? You have people. Think of people who could function in that kind of hybrid connective role. Ryan Osgar
literally is the world's best player.
Eric Taylor, like they have more people who could be that middle piece than most teams have ever, right? You could make Jack Williams that guy if you needed to. They have plenty of other people who could operate as the core handler, right? They could make Jack Williams that guy. They have Jonathan Nethercutt and Matt Gushahanis and Saul Yannick. Like they're replete with talented, experienced players who we've seen be successful. So to me, I don't put a lot of weight in that. Yes, Allen is a great player and has an important role in this team, but we just talked about Pony missing key players, and they made it to semifinals. I mean, they're missing two of the top 15 players in the game, and they reached semifinals, right? Like,
And I don't think you would put Allen in that category.
Right. Although, yeah, I guess they had Grant for a bunch of that time. But like teams miss people. Like that's a thing that happens, right? They're like, you can't have your whole team crumble because you're missing one glue guy. Like, I guess that's why they call them glue guys, but it seems excessive to me and a mistake of execution. But
I also think it's a lot to try to add 2 guys to your offensive line in the end of August.
I mean,
and expect it to work.
These are 2 guys who a bunch of people on this team have played with for months already.
I know.
Have played with that.
I know.
WCC. Have played with that in ADL. Like, I don't know. These are the kinds of issues that plenty of other teams are encountering and handling better than Ring did. And it could have been worse. I mean, they looked like they were going to lose that game to temper. Like. They lost 3/4 of that game to temper, maybe 4/5 of that game to temper.
They did,
and that would have really
I remember watching the score
alarms.
come in on the ticker on Field Pass. I'm watching it come in on the ticker, and I'm like, "Oh my God, Temper is up like 4," and it's the second half. They rallied back, but it was they had no chance to beat Truck the way their offense was playing. Shout out though, they had some strong performances from some guys. The Alex Davis had a great season. I thought Jacob Fairfax was a phenomenal defender at Nationals. A lot of guys played well. LSB played really well. Turnover free on the stat sheet.
I don't know, man. I don't know if I want to hear it. I'm tired of all like we don't need to hype up this team that couldn't get the job done. I don't need to hear about how great all their players were. Save it. This team wins enough that we have our chances to talk about how great all their players are.
Fair enough.
But I got a lot less weird, North Carolina Twitter hype after Toro flamed out and Phoenix and Ring of Fire both struggled. Carolina panic button? Did we overhype Carolina? Is the dream dead already? No, that's obviously
it's not dead.
Look,
I think we'll see Ring and Phoenix.
Clip that part for the Instagram to get us the clicks. Click me going like Carolina's dead. It's over. God, it broke off into the sea.
I'm not going to say anything for a second so we can clip that part. Carolina broke off into the sea. It's like the Bugs Bunny sawing Florida meme.
I'm sure our Carolina-based editor will greatly appreciate this segment.
So let's see. South Central had a really good tournament. Bravo wins. Double Wide finishes in the top 8. And Double Wide was solid, Keith. I mean, they ended up losing close to Rhino in the quarters. Ultimately, they only win 3 of their 7 games at Nationals, but their losses all come to quite good teams. Do you think that we need to be watching for the South Central to keep rising up here?
I mean, if you mean those 2 teams, yes. They both had a lot of young contributors who I think could take big steps forward. Shout out to Double Wide for, I think, really outperforming people's expectations, certainly on the field, even if the overall record is not that sterling. A lot of players who I think people aren't familiar with who could really help push this team into kind of its new era. Your Joe Wiley's and I know that there's this old guard that we've associated with this team, but they had a lot of guys who were making a big difference for them. I mean, Kyle Hankey is the one that I'm kind of waiting for him to step up, and like Chase Cunningham returning and playing a big role was nice, but Zach Slayton and Joe Wiley, like I think these guys could be a big part of what the future of Double Wide is going to look like. But this could be a great learning opportunity for them to develop as a team and as a program with all these young guys there. And Bravo, we've talked a lot about Bravo. Obviously, there's a lot to be excited about for them.
Bigger disappointment, Chain or Sockeye?
Sockeye, I'd say. I mean, it's the way that Chain went out is bad, and they like kind of should have lost that game to Vault in pre-quarters. And if that had happened, then I would have definitely said Chain. But I think I had lower expectations for Chain than a lot of people did. And, Sockeye, they felt a little flat all weekend. Like I never really felt like they were a threat once we started seeing them play. So I'm going to say Sockeye for me, bigger disappointment. They lost to freaking Omen.
I mean, I think Sockeye is a team that truly does not care once they get into consolation.
I'm pretty sure they phoned it
in. Not that that's an excuse for finishing ultimately in 14th place, ahead of only Mad Men and Condors and behind Goat, Omen, and Temper. But, they definitely weren't trying when they got to that point. I think I say, gosh, it's a tough call. Ultimately, I think it's got to be Sockeye because they blew it against Bravo. They're up in the second half late and they're up 3 and they lost. Whereas, Chain, sure, maybe they were up against it against Vault. That's true. But, I think they lose to Pony even if they play their A game. That's just a terrible matchup for them.
Oh my God.
They lost 15-6 up. I mean, they got absolutely crushed. But again, they play their best game. They lose 15-12, 15-13. So I just think their path was not optimal. I forget now who they lost to in pool play.
Machine.
Oh, it was Machine, right? So, ultimately their deciding losses were Machine Pony. That's not terrible. I mean, it still feels like a disappointment because of what we saw from them during the season. It looked like they could be a bigger threat, but it just didn't materialize. But on the other hand, Sockeye, it feels like the team needs to kind of reconfigure itself in some ways. I mean, things are not right. Somebody was saying Dylan Freechild needs to return to Rhino to go back to a real contender.
It was a great line.
I was like, really, oh my God.
Great line.
And it's, it would be very chaotic for him to do that. He lives in Southern California now, so there's nothing stopping him from doing something like that. But, Sockeye just culturally feels a little shaky right now.
They seem like this year, I don't know if this was their intention, but they do seem like they gave the young guys a lot of key run. And I think that could bode well for what's going to happen next. I don't know what Raiders' future is going to be or Nick Stewart, how much Simon Montague feels like he has left in the tank or CFO or whatnot. But these young guys, they can be pretty damn good. Obviously there's still a lot of growing to do for the likes of Declan Miller and Asaf Golan, these really young guys. But Noah Kuhlman, I think he has a lot of potential to get better. Garrett Martin taking big steps forward this year. Obviously Tony Vanieri. Tony Vanieri has a superstar's game. I can't stand the kid's attitude, but he has real game and can play both ways. And with some more polish on it, he could be so good.
Yeah, and he's been showing that skill for a few years now. I mean, he was one of the clear top recruits out of high school.
Yeah, how they develop these young players, I think, is really what's going to define Sockeye.
Interesting team. A mix of very young and grizzled vets. So we'll see what happens with them. But they win their first 2 games, and then they lose to Pony, blow the lead against Bravo, lose to Omen, beat Condors, lose to Goat. Sockeye is such a strange team. It feels like every other year they just play really bad, and then they alternate that with playing amazing. So next year should be great.
I like it.
Okay.
Projection.
Any final thoughts, Keith? We haven't talked too much about the Vault, Temper, Omen, Goat, Mad Men crew. Any thoughts on those teams?
Aside from Mad Men, those teams were probably better than I expected. Across the board. I thought the Goat had some potential. I took him in the game. Hell yeah. But Vault definitely looked better than I thought, and so did Temper. So those were teams that I was I think people might when the chips get pushed in the middle of the table, they're going to fold. And that was not the case. So I'm very curious to see how those teams continue to grow over the next season or two. For Condors, I think that this season was they knew this wasn't their year. They got a lot of developing to do. But we'll have to keep an eye out for what's happening. Mad Men, they were out of their depth.
Temper, Vault, and Goat all gave their opponents very tough games in pre-quarters. But it's interesting, Keith. At the end of the day, the seeds of teams that made the quarters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. The only team that's missing, the 5th seed, that's Machine. But the cream rose to the top after a wacky pool play.
The person who decides the seeding is listening to this, pumping their fist. Like, everybody always says I get it wrong, but look what happened. Just don't look at the mixed division.
All right, that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be joining subscribers in our sub bonus segment Out the Back. And so you can get in on the private RSS feed with any subscription. So head over to ultiworld.com/subscribe to find out more about that. Got some more interviews coming for you next week. And we will also be continuing to break down the club season. We're also going to start to take a look a little ahead to the college season. Keith, it's here. You're coaching. The fall crisp air is here. And that means that, we got Classic City Classic around the corner. And the full college experience is almost here. We're just about 2 months away from the start of the official regular season, Keith.
2 months? Don't even say that. I mean, it's weird in the Northeast. Like, it doesn't really start for like another 6 months. Once they let everybody go outside. Man, I wish we could afford to fly to California for a tournament. But the actual the season we'll start getting into our Florida tournaments and our California tournaments, and the few that will brave the cold. Early next year. It's crazy to believe it's already back, but well, this is the cycle. We're in the cycle, and College Ultimate is going to be so much fun. We saw so many talented players getting ready to join up with college programs, and I'd love some clarification on who's eligible to play college. Anybody know who's allowed to play? What the deal is? I don't know.
I think there's no rules.
I mean, I've literally have players who are like, Can I play next year?
Were you born after 1990? You're eligible.
Yeah, but like it's like convoluted. It's like, were you born after 1990, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Wednesdays between the hours of this time, then you can't play. If you played 1 year of field hockey,
is it so complicated that we should have an article about this? Maybe. I'm being serious.
No, it's not that it's complicated. I just want actual clarification on how the extensions work for players who have not yet graduated. That is the actual question. Like, do players want to know if they get an extra year? That's it.
I think they do.
That's what I think, but I would love this official reminder of that.
Sounds like we need to do a little digging and make sure we have the actual answers to this. Okay, that's the plan. Thanks so much, everybody. We will talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.